Welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger right here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And in this podcast, I chat with just a very diverse bunch of people and I learn their story and then I condense it down so that you can hear helpful, relatable stories from Kiwis who are sharing their experiences about their personal finances here in New Zealand. Thanks for letting me join you on your commute, your walk, your run, or while you get some jobs done around your house. So righto, let's get on with it. Today's guest, Gail, has been on quite the financial trip, and she is still going. For reasons I'll get to, she experienced a bit of a wake-up call in 2019 when, aged 41, she found herself with a bit on her plate. She had a failing business, income of just $25,000 a year, zero emergency fund, and absolutely no savings either. She was actually drawing down on her mortgage to pay her mortgage. And yes, that's a thing. She had mounting IRD debt plus credit card debt of about $4,000, and she was using buy now, pay later to buy the basics in life. Now, after listing down her not insignificant problems, she asked herself how on earth she could get out of this mess. But at that stage, no ideas were forthcoming, other than finding a new husband, getting back with the old one, or winning the lottery. Now, ultimately, she realised that she was the solution to her own problems, so she started to get on with it. And well, as you've heard on my podcast many times, it's amazing what a difference a bit of knowledge and a bit of time can make. Today, aged 47, Gail's got a plan, and that is to put the past behind her, build her future, and retire in 2031 by the age of 53. Her financial situation is so common, so I just know that by telling her story today, she's going to help you solve your own financial problems too. Just like hearing all the 109 episodes that have gone before this one played a huge part in starting her out on this journey. She said that she never would have thought it possible if she hadn't heard of other people doing it, and just hearing the variety of ways that people have made their situation better was a huge help to her. So that's the setup, and before we really get going, I've just got a quick message from today's fabulous sponsor. Okay, you've got me, I'll admit it, I'm the money nerd in our household. I genuinely enjoy keeping a very close eye on PocketSmith as it tracks our retirement funds, our investments, the value of our home, and of course the daily flow of money into our many bank accounts. The details fascinate me, numbers fascinate me. But my husband Johnny, not so much. He just wants to know we're doing okay, but he is just not interested in all those details. We both think of money differently. PocketSmith is aware of this as it lets me create a custom dashboard that shows Johnny the same information I see, but differently, in far less detail, meaning he still gets to play an active role in our joint financial planning using information that makes sense to him. If you have a spouse trying to opt out of talking about your money, I think PocketSmith might be the secret weapon to bring you together and foster healthy conversations around money in your home. If you want to supercharge your finances with PocketSmith, have we got a deal for you. Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of PocketSmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. Now, Gail is actually not her real name. She wanted to remain anonymous, but there is a woman called Gail who was instrumental in helping the woman I'm telling you about today dig her way out of the hole she was in. And I know that the real Gail will be listening to this, and I didn't want to skip past the fact that sometimes in a person's life, the right person, in this case Gail, shows up at the right time, and they might never understand the profound impact they've had unless we tell them. Everyone needs a Gail in their life. The wonderful Wahine I'm telling you all about today is originally from the UK, and she grew up with a slightly younger brother. Her mum was one of 12 and worked in office management, and her dad was a miner turned warehouse manager. Her mum is 12 years younger than her dad, but due to good financial planning, when her dad retired at the age of 65, her mum was able to retire at the same time, aged 53. This was achieved by both of them paying into pensions and then by downsizing their home to free up cash at the point of retirement. Gail said that they were always on top of their retirement plans, always used a financial advisor, and always had an end point in mind, both in terms of age of retirement and the money to pay for it. Because they knew their finances so well, they knew what lifestyle they wanted, where they wanted to spend retirement, which was a mix of living in a transportable type home in an idyllic part of France, and a maisonette, which she tells me is a semi-detached small home, in England, and they knew how much it would cost. When they had reached the required amount, they retired. She said that they always wanted to retire while they were still fit and healthy and able to enjoy maximum good times, and they credit their ongoing good health now to retiring when they did. In case you think they are incredibly wealthy, she said that by some people's standards, well, that's not the case. But they've worked out precisely how much they need and are extremely content and comfortable with where they're at in life. Gail said that she had a lovely upbringing with a family who loved and supported her. She got her first proper job straight out of school at the age of 19 in about 1997. She worked as a finance assistant for a large shoe manufacturer who was a huge employer in her part of England. Almost everyone she knew was either currently working there or had worked there at some point. She earned £13,000 a year, joined the company pension plan, which meant that she invested from a young age, and she moved out of home and into a flat with her boyfriend. Life was off to a pretty good start. While she doesn't recall specific education or conversations around money, she felt she had a pretty good handle on it. She used to keep a little red notebook, noting down all of her expenses, and said that she felt on top of it. She was on top of paying her bills, and she would save money too, she said. But, like many, she was only ever saving money to spend later. And at such a young age, there was never a thought of saving towards a house deposit, or even much thought given to the reason for investing in the pension scheme. At the age of 23, she was promoted to working with buyers and suppliers, store managers and supply chain managers. They were the number crunchers in the company, she said, and her income rose to £20,000 a year. It was at this time, in 2001, that she purchased a home for £60,000. So clearly this saver did up her savings game at some point. Well, not quite. She talked to her parents about the prospect of buying a house, and they could see that she was managing her money okay, so they offered to loan her £5,000 plus interest. So she actually never had to save for a deposit at all on her 2-bedroom terraced house. She simply switched from paying rent to paying a mortgage, she said. While at that time she did get some income protection insurance, sold to her by a willing insurance salesperson, she never put money aside for an emergency fund, even though she now had a house and a car, both of which were likely to need repairs. Instead, she just settled into making the payments the bank suggested, and any money left over was spent on socialising and clothes. There were no flashy cars or holidays, but any surplus went straight back out the door, she said. While her brother took a different path, racking up and, with the help of family, clearing credit card debt many times, she didn't. She never needed to. Her career was growing, as was her income, and she managed to live a life she enjoyed on what she earned. In 2003, now aged 25, and just 2 years after buying it for £60,000, and without having spent barely anything on it, she sold her house for £120,000. Lucky timing meant that she said she sold her house in a housing boom and doubled her money. It seemed relatively easy, and she was well on her way. She immediately bought a bigger 3-bedroom house for £130,000. Her mortgage had now increased and was £70,000. At that time, she thought the way to a comfortable retirement was to continue to upsize into bigger and more expensive houses so that, at the point of retirement, she could sell, buy a smaller house, and live out her retirement on the money that it had made, much like her parents had. With each job, Gail built her career. She said she was very lucky to gain skills and experience with some very reputable international companies, which meant that she had a desirable CV. And with each new skill she gained, her income increased. And in time, some big-name retailers came knocking, and she began to get headhunted for every new role. Because they called her, not the other way round, It meant she could negotiate a good salary, so by the age of 25, she was earning more than her dad did at the end of his career, something that felt quite strange to her, especially with not having done any tertiary study, she said. But what she shows is that you can absolutely build a career by going directly into the workforce and being ambitious enough to progress. In 2005, she moved to a new town, working for a big global brand, earning £25,000 a year. The value of her home had plateaued, and the buying and selling process was expensive and complicated, so she decided to rent it out instead, which also meant if the job didn't work out, well, she had a place to return to. What also played on her mind was having made money so easily in the last sale, it kind of set the standard, rightly or wrongly, for the next sale. And given there was no money to be made, there was just no reason for her to sell, she said. But in 2006, she did decide to sell the second house she had bought, selling it for £150,000, leaving her with about £75,000 in cash once the mortgage and her parents were paid back in full. And she put the money in the bank and went renting while she worked out where to live next. And it was during this time that she met and fell very deeply in love with her future husband. Without one single conversation about money, in 2008, she put all of her £75,000 into a flat for the two of them to buy and live in. Doing so just seemed to make sense to Gail. His name was on the house title right beside hers, and they didn't talk about my money or his money. It all became our money. Both of them had good jobs. She was earning over £30,000 a year by now, and he was earning about £50,000. They both drove older, smaller cars. They did their flat up a bit. They enjoyed local holidays away, but other than that, to this day, Gail has no idea what they did with their money. It just all went out the door. In 2009, she was made redundant, and she spent her redundancy payout on a second-hand car for herself. She gave her old car to her boyfriend, and hindsight shows her that what he did with his old car, money-wise, probably should have been a red flag. Instead of selling his old car because it was still worth something, he drove it to a random street in a different neighbourhood, locked it up, and just walked off. She has no idea whatever became of it, and in hindsight sees that it was an irresponsible thing to do. She was relaxed about spending all of her redundancy money because she walked straight into a new job for a huge global e-commerce platform on a higher salary of £38,000 a year. By now, all of her workplace training meant that she was a business analyst working in supply chain management. In 2009-2010, they sold their flat, again coming out with £75,000, which they put in the bank while they planned their next move. Back to renting they went, just briefly, until in 2010 she and her boyfriend took a 3-week holiday of a lifetime to Aotearoa, spending about £8,000 of their house savings. And it was while here that they reconnected with family and they fell in love with this country. She said what many of us often forget, we literally live in the country where everyone wants to be. Kiwis are so darn lucky to live here, she said. They got back to the UK after their trip, they continued to rent, and they spent another £7,000 of their house savings to get married. And after just 1 year away from them, she actually returned to her old employer, the one who'd made her redundant, and she was now earning over £40,000 a year. They were a far nicer employer to work for, she said, which showed her that she valued being surrounded by a good, supportive organisation instead of one driven solely by profit at the expense of its staff. In 2011, she and her husband moved to Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. Now, initially they stayed with relatives before renting a place of their own, and next on their list was finding work. Her husband's occupation was on the skills shortage list, so he managed to secure a job earning about 50,000 New Zealand dollars a year. But for her, finding work was a lot harder. For the first few months, she couldn't even get an interview, with the main reason being, she said, her lack of a tertiary qualification. Gail said it was unsettling to go from being offered jobs left, right and centre with massive global companies offering a good income to no one wanting her. It took 3 months to finally find something, although it was just temping work. Although disappointing, she said that they were both prepared for lower wages when they came to New Zealand and a quieter and less stressful working environment that might go hand in hand with that. They moved here for the lifestyle, plus they also thought that houses were cheap here in New Zealand compared to the UK, and it wouldn't be too hard to buy a property for themselves. Gail then managed to move into a job as a finance assistant, earning $50,000 a year, and despite it being a huge drop in income compared to the UK, she felt that she was on her way again. In 2012, they got New Zealand residency and she joined KiwiSaver, which was great news on both counts, except for the fact that she joined a default provider and was plopped into a random fund, which she can't remember exactly, but it was probably a low-risk one, meaning low returns over time. Now, Gail loves a good wedding, so much so that to fill in her time while she was looking for work, she had started up a wedding blog that rapidly blew up. By 2012, she had gained 4 million followers on Pinterest, right at the time when Pinterest was gaining widespread popularity, and she started to make an income from it, about $10,000 to $15,000 a year in the early years. Her site got noticed by the right people at the right time, and she watched in wonder as people in their thousands and then millions started to follow her. She began to spend a lot of time creating content for her site. While she regrets that she was slow to monetize when advertisers came knocking, she continued with her site for about 8 years, and at its peak years of about 2014-2015, after expenses, Gail was earning about $50,000 a year. But she said for that income, she put in a lot of work creating content. Plus, it sometimes made her feel a little bit ick to put advertisements on her site that she didn't actually want. And slowly, due to factors inside and outside of her control, it all began to wind down. But up until quite recently, she did continue to earn just a little bit from it. But towards the end, it was not income she could rely on. What with the original holiday to New Zealand, paying for a wedding, actually relocating permanently to New Zealand and buying a car when they got here, plus all sorts of other since-forgotten expenses, that £75,000 that they used to have in the bank for a house deposit was whittled all the way down to just £20,000. But that too was soon to disappear, but in a way that she just had not seen coming. Now, despite being together since 2008, her and her husband had never had a deep conversation about their finances, so it came as a shock to come home to a visibly upset husband one day, with the cause of his distress being that debt he had run away from in the UK, debt she never knew he even had tracked him down to New Zealand. He had thought he would just bury his head in the sand and that they wouldn't find him here. But they did. Turns out he had multiple personal loans, store cards, plus 4 credit cards that he had not paid on, including one that he had used to buy her engagement ring. Now, she loved her husband wholeheartedly, so she was not angry or upset. Instead, she's a solutions-focused woman and she just wanted to help him fix it. He'd just gotten in a little over his head and she was just relieved that they had the money to pay off the debts. She encouraged him to lay it all out on the table and they would make a plan to contact each one and pay them all off. And in total, there were 8 debts, a total of £20,000. It was Gail who made the phone calls and corresponded with all the companies he owed money to, making each of them offers until they accepted a lower amount, which was then paid. She took it over and she got it done, and that spelled the end of the £75,000 that used to sit in their bank account. It was all gone. Now, what hurt her was that her dad was asking, "When are you guys going to buy a home? You've got your house money here ready to go." Well, she didn't have the heart to tell him what had happened and instead just kept changing the subject. So with the house money completely blown, she really felt the urgent need to save up a house deposit again. So, always a hard worker, she went to work. The blog took a lot of work but was making money, and she was working 40 hours a week at her day job as she raced to catch up. He did too, although not quite with the same intensity, and the two of them built up a house deposit. However, her husband, who in my opinion never quite felt the brunt of the mess he had created, thought that all work and no play made for a bit of a dull life, and that they didn't come all the way out here to New Zealand to work so hard. He missed his fun wife, not quite understanding that she was so determined to try to claw back what was spent. She said that although they loved each other, They never had the type of relationship where they could talk honestly about how they were feeling. So their marriage went through a rough patch because he wanted to get out and do stuff, while she was always at work trying to get back to where they used to be. They were working at odds with each other, and neither had the skills to communicate how they both felt or why they were doing what they were doing. So the walls went up, she said, and she went quiet, thinking that she was keeping quiet for the right reasons, to avoid an argument, or because she didn't want to hurt her partner and make them or her feel bad. Their differences when it came to money was just one of the cracks they had been trying to paper over. Gail had been working all hours of the day and night on her online business, which meant she wasn't as available as either of them would have liked, meaning neither of them were having much fun in life. And while they were both unhappy, neither was able to talk about it until one day they were on the brink of separation. Thankfully, they worked through that period and they soldiered on, though never quite addressing the cracks in their marriage, but being happy nonetheless. So by 2013, they had scraped together a 5% deposit, which was just $15,000 to buy a $310,000 home. In 2014, she moved into blogging full-time, and her husband, with his full-time job, was very supportive of her doing it, using his computer skills to help wherever he could. It was at its peak at this stage, making $50,000 a year gross, before starting to dwindle over time. Gail got a puppy and settled into working from home. With no employer anymore, she said goodbye to employer contributions into her KiwiSaver scheme, choosing instead to just voluntarily contribute the $1,042 so that she could get the government contribution, which at that time was $521 a year, but has since been halved to just $260 a year. What fund was she in? Well, she still had no idea. Then, in a classic Kiwi move, but really you do see it all over the world, in 2017 they sold their perfectly okay home to buy their dream home, and they added another $50,000 to their mortgage to secure their $500,000 property. Life ticked along until, sadly, just 2 years later, in 2019, and now aged 41, everything changed for Gail when she and her husband separated. It's fair to say that she was devastated by this, but got herself together as best she could and began to move on. In order to divvy up their assets and go their separate ways, they sold their dream house for $510,000, pretty much what they paid for it. And once the mortgage had been paid and all the costs were covered, each walked away with about $150,000. Gail wanted to get straight back into home ownership again because she didn't want to be shut out of the housing market. So now, on her own, she set about finding a cheaper property to buy. It was a scary time for her. Her window was closing before she had to be out of the marital home, and house prices were suddenly marching upwards. But at each and every auction, she kept getting outbid until, out of pure desperation, she said, she bought her current house, a 2.5-bedroom home, for $484,000. Buying was made particularly hard because by this time, her business income was in decline and she was making just $25,000 a year. I asked what happened to that online business and how on earth did she secure a mortgage with an income of just $25,000 a year. Put simply, Google changed their algorithms, which decreased the traffic going to her website, and Etsy and fashion retailers she'd been working with changed their cookie window and percentage payments, which decreased her income bit by bit. And this decreasing income didn't matter so much when she was married, as they had his income to rely on, but when she found herself single and realized she was still putting a lot of hours into her online business, it really mattered. Her online income was only going in one direction, and that was down. So she managed to pick up a contract for a few hours a week doing social media and some bookkeeping for a company, and her banker said that with income from her online business, the bookkeeping work, and if she rented out both of her spare rooms, one of which was really only a half room, she was happy to give Gail a mortgage. Plus, her parents didn't know quite how precarious her situation was, but to help her move on, they gave her an early inheritance of 80,000 New Zealand dollars to help her out, meaning that she took on a mortgage of about $260,000 while earning barely $50,000 a year. And did she rent out the spare rooms? No. Talking this through with Gail, she said that the math didn't math, and she was still a bit unsure how she managed to get a mortgage across the line when she did. She had no emergency fund in case something went wrong. She had no savings of any kind, except for money she had put aside to pay taxes owing to the IRD from her business, which meant that pretty much as soon as she moved into her new home and took on her mortgage, she borrowed an additional $20,000, which she was actually using to pay her mortgage, which is absolutely not what you want to be doing. Newly single, she was going out drinking and socializing, and she put her head in the sand, she said. And life carried on, with her pretty much living as she had before, but without the double income to pay for it. Life cost what it cost, and she scraped together money to pay for it, including spending the money she'd put aside to pay her taxes. She said that she saw it was there, and she just spent it. Gail said that in the beginning of this new phase, it had never occurred to her to go back to tracking her spending like she once did when she was younger, because she felt that she was not frivolous, was not spending excessively, thinking instead, well, this is what my life costs, and I've got no other choice but to spend what I spend. But all those little expenses add up, meaning that all of the money plus borrowed money just had a habit of disappearing. Throughout all this, she kept paying for her life, health, dog, house, contents, and car insurance because she knew that if she let some of it go, it would be hard to get back. Why keep the life insurance given that she was now single, I asked? Well, her reasoning was that she might meet someone else. Now, before too long, she was in credit card debt of about $4,000 and was also using buy now, pay later just to buy the basics. She owed money to the IRD and was borrowing against her mortgage to pay her mortgage. She knew she was off kilter, but she had no idea how to get herself out of it. Well, that's not quite true. She did have a few ideas for an escape plan. She thought it would involve either getting back together with her husband, which was never going to happen, find a new husband, which after a few attempts at online dating exposed the awful selection of men available, or the old favourite of winning the lottery, until she realised that she couldn't afford to pay for regular lottery tickets. So, thankfully, she shelved her 3 bad ideas, and in 2020, when her contract ended doing the bookkeeping and the social media work, she quickly got a part-time job, which is all that was offered, earning $25 an hour. Plus, she received KiwiSaver contributions, working as a bookkeeper at an accounting firm. Now, I just want to pause for a moment here, just in case someone is listening who feels like Gail's story is speaking directly to them and they want to know what to do right now. If you do feel like every expense in the world is coming your way and you are struggling to keep up, my advice to you is to stop. Immediately stop any and all spending that is not instrumental in keeping you alive. The answer to everything has to be no. A friend invites you out for coffee? Well, unless they're paying, no. Your child needs new school shoes? Unless they are literally falling off their feet, which they probably aren't yet, no. You need a haircut? No. Stop entirely and take stock, because as you will see in a moment, this works. Gail was happy to have regular, guaranteed part-time work because it felt like a move back into stable employment, and she was also still trying to nurse her blog along to bring in extra income. Still, based on the way she was living, this was not enough to cover all of her outgoings. But it was this new job that introduced her to a woman who I mentioned at the start of this episode, her new employer, who saw a spark in Gail that she wanted to help ignite. And she convinced her to study towards an accounting qualification. Plus, she encouraged her to work on herself and the softer skills needed to work and live well. In 2021, she started 2 years of part-time study towards a diploma, which gave her a qualification towards becoming a management account specialist, but equally importantly, it was good for her confidence. Women, and probably men, who have come through a divorce will always benefit from someone else seeing the good in you. Her new mentor is the person Gail credits as changing her life, and someone she cannot thank enough because she really stepped into her life right when she needed her the most telling her that she had the skills needed to do well and showing her what path to take. And it was with her encouragement in 2021 that Gail took a new job with a new employer, working as an accountant this time, earning $70,000 a year. Her income took a good jump, but she also borrowed another $20,000 on her mortgage as well. But ideas of changing her situation were beginning to awaken in her. Also around this time, her ex-husband, who she remains on really good terms with, also stepped up. The $20,000 she had drawn down was rapidly disappearing, and she said that, in all honesty, she was desperate when she asked him out for a coffee so that she could explain her predicament. She took a shot at having a conversation with him about the point that, when they got together in 2008, she had cash and it turned out that he had debt. Yet, when they separated in 2019, they split things 50-50, as they were legally obligated to do. Despite him having moved on and having new commitments of his own, they heard each other out with respect and empathy, and after taking a short time to consider it, he gave her $20,000 back. This brought her a reprieve, and she remains grateful to this day that despite him having no legal obligation to pay her anything, he understood her situation and he helped her, and one day she vows to pay him back again. While Gail was making some incredibly positive changes in some aspects of her life, such as her career, she said that there was only a dawning awareness that she had big money issues, meaning that the financial management of her personal life was slower to change, which is very common to see. There was no single straw that broke the camel's back. Instead, she was working out that even earning a solid income of $70,000 a year was still not enough. Her mortgage interest rates were coming to the end of the fixed term, and they were definitely going to go up, and she was asking herself, how on earth am I going to afford that increase? She was going to bed at night genuinely worried about money and trying to work out how she could afford something. If family back in the UK needed her, how could she pay to fly back to help them? If she got sick and she couldn't earn a living, what on earth would she do? She was still struggling to get by and would go so far as to eat a carrot and porridge for dinner, a rather strange but very cheap meal, while wondering how she was going to afford next month's mortgage payment. It was slowly dawning on her that something had to change. It just had to. So there was not one awful, sudden, unexpected expense, or God forbid, an illness, but more of a slow but consistent voice saying, this can't carry on. Until she finally came to the conclusion that no one is coming to rescue her, and she is the only one who can help herself. But how? Well, the first steps towards a new phase unexpectedly began in December of 2022 when Gail popped in to see her old boss, the real Gail, and now her mentor, just before Christmas, and had casually mentioned that over the holidays she was somehow going to get her financial life together, at which point her friend introduced her to the concept of financial independence, and she suggested she take a listen to a podcast called The Happy Saver. And it honestly makes my day every time I hear this, and these days I hear it a lot. Gail credits this conversation as the beginning of her financial independence education. And during the summer of 2022-2023, Gail went on a deep dive. She binged this very podcast and followed up on the other resources that are often mentioned, with Choose FI, J.L. Collins, and Mr. Money Mustache being standouts. For each, she went right back to the beginning of their podcasting or blogging archives, which for someone in her dire financial position is a commitment of time worth making. But she didn't just read and listen to a lot of content over the holidays, she actually took action. She had a budget meeting with herself, which was a real eye-opener for Gail. She looked at every single dollar earned and, more importantly, spent in all of 2022, and she created a spreadsheet of exactly how much she earned and exactly how much she spent, and very importantly, where she was spending it. She just about fell off her chair, she said, because she was beyond shocked at where her money was at. While she was eating a poor diet of carrots and porridge to cut costs, she concluded she had wasted money when she had spent $3,000 on her dog, $11,000 on gifts, $4,000 on clothes, and $10,000 on decor to make her house look pretty. And facing this head-on and calculating that she had spent $30,000 more than she earned brought her to tears. She earned $70,000 a year, but she spent $100,000 a year. As tough as it is to face up to this fact, at least she now knew. No longer could she say to herself, "Oh, well, that's what my life costs." Now she has proof of where she spends her money, and she gets to decide for herself if it sits well with her or not. Well, it didn't at all. Now that she had accurate numbers, she started to plan out a budget for the coming year of 2023. The new year was set to begin with another new job as a senior client relationship manager with an accounting firm. She said that basically she specializes in having conversations with people, looking at their business budgets and cash flows, working on goal setting and long-term strategy, rather than the nitty-gritty of tax and accounting. I wonder if you listening to this can now possibly see any parallels to her evolving career and how she might use these skills to manage her own money. I certainly could, so of course I asked her about it. Gail said that she could look at other people's money and have clarity, but with her own money there was an unwillingness to go that deep. She was just too in it to step back and see it objectively. But all this new information about financial independence that she was learning, coupled with the work she had been doing around self-growth and everything her mentor had told her to work on, made her step back and look at her life more objectively. Now, as 2023 got underway, Gail just wanted to learn everything in an effort to understand how to think about money. Her income would now be $88,000 a year, which was a good $18,000 bump from her previous role. She began to allocate this income to her known expenses, such as her insurances, her mortgage, etc. And she had a long, hard think about the money spent on gifts and home decor and all the other things that had been sucking up her income. And she worked out something interesting about herself. She said that if I had have asked her what was important to her, she would have said family, friends, and travel. But when she looked at where she was spending all her money previously, it was not being spent in areas that she said she values. So she set about changing that. Prior to her reset, her plan had been to borrow another $20,000 on her mortgage, and now she sat down and she made herself a plan to stop herself from doing that. She had to stop using her house as an ATM to fill in the gap between what she earned and what she spent. She had to stop borrowing money to essentially buy shoes for herself and gifts for other people. Now she was earning more, and she was committed to also spend far less than she had previously. Whew, thank goodness. With a budget in place, she started her new job, and with eyes and ears tuned to anything financial, she did what many do. She decided to start investing. Now, it's all too common, and it's not that surprising. When you have spent your life paying interest, and then you learn about the idea of compounding interest and earning it, it's very exciting to start investing in and attempt to earn some interest for once instead of paying it. If I had have met her at this time, I'd have warned her off investing for now because she could get to it soon enough. She would have been better to concentrate on righting her financial ship first, making sure she had her debts paid back, an emergency fund in place, etc., before starting to invest in anything other than KiwiSaver. It's too easy, and I've heard it 100 times, to rush to invest, only to have to sell your investments because you need the cash. I get why people do it. They feel they have some catching up to do. But if I could give any advice to the person listening to this who can 100% relate to Gail right now, just hold off rushing to invest. You have time. But invest she did, setting up a Sharesies account and buying the New Zealand Top 50 and a S&P 500 ETF, plus a variety of others. Plus she took a punt on buying Nvidia, a single stock she had heard was going places, plus a few others. In the early stages, she felt excited by investing. It felt easy and it felt fun, and she fell into the trap of overcomplicating investing by getting sidetracked into researching companies to buy. But she got lucky with Nvidia, and much like the value of her first house, it went up without her having to do anything, and this gave her a false sense of security and a confidence in her investing abilities that she really didn't deserve to have. She knows that it was pure good luck that her first single stock went up. But thinking about it was keeping her awake at night too, and the constant checking of it throughout the day didn't do much for her stress levels either. When a single stock goes up, you start to worry about when the time is right to sell it, or if you should sell it at all. Well, she settled on selling a third of it. Now, investing done well is done when you are financially stable, buy and hold a big fund, as per the wisdom of all of the resources she'd been reading, and you set up a regular habit of investing and you just let it ride. You don't check it constantly, and even if you do check it, your blood pressure, it just doesn't change. Having invested for a long time myself, investing isn't fun, it's just a means to an end, which is financial freedom, and slow and steady inputs into a large ETF will win out over time. I suggest that if you want to have some fun, well, go and have your fun elsewhere. Now, one other significant event happened at the beginning of 2023. She began to have monthly finance meetings with her brother back in England. When she told him what she was doing and why, he jumped in, boots and all too. They both started building their own spreadsheets based on their own numbers, and she said it's just amazing how different they look. He uses a lot of colour, has a lot of columns, and he even breaks it down to how much he spends in certain shops. He has a danger shop highlighted, and if he has to input spending into that column, it's a sign to him to stop and take a moment. And from memory, I think it was the convenience store Greg's. Now, each month they chat about all aspects of both of their finances, and this has become a time they both really look forward to each month. And I'll come back to this shortly. Also in 2023, she and her brother found Rebel Finance School and took their free 10-week money course for the first time. But Gail didn't just need to arrest her slide into more debt, she had to pay off the debts that she'd accumulated too. More money would be helpful at this point. So in 2024, she started Airbnb-ing her spare room, something she was very nervous about to begin with. But it has been a good experience, and she said that she's met some lovely people, with just the occasional weirdo thrown in, and the income she makes does make a difference. Now, income varies depending on the time of year, and she charges about $90 a night in winter and $120 to $170 a night in summer, and she prefers people to book for 2 to 3 nights. For every $100 gross that she earns, she nets, after taxes and expenses, about $65, and she notices the lack of income in these quieter periods. In 2024, she sold off her old blog for just a little money, which she directed to her debt, and she started up a new side hustle, which is still in its infancy, with her intention being to help women find their way post-separation. And when she managed to create a gap for once between income and expenditure, she used that gap plus extra income earned from the likes of her Airbnb to pay off her IRD debt in full, which at its peak reached about $7,000. She had worked directly with the IRD to create a payment plan, and whenever she had a bigger lump sum of money, she made extra payments. She made this debt a priority because although they were not chasing her for payment yet, owing them money was keeping her awake at night. I'll often hear from people who owe money in various ways, whether it be a credit card, a student loan, or in Gail's case to the tax department, and I always advocate just moving heaven and earth to pay them off, because although the math may say make small regular payments and keep your money in your account for longer, it's the psychological toll that owing money has on a person that is far too heavy a burden for many. That and the fact that you will have to forego a chunk of your future income for a long, long time to service the debt. While some people sleep like a baby while making minimum payments, in my experience, most don't. Debts like these just occupy too much space in your head. So regardless of interest rates and payment plans, I'd encourage you to just smash them out and just get rid of them. Then you don't ever have to think or worry about them again. Gail's approach has been to pay off some of her consumer debt in full, but she still has a GEM visa with an outstanding balance of $2,035, which she is paying off at $50 per month. So she still has around 41 more weekly payments to go. It has a 0% interest rate, meaning that she must pay it in full by the due date if she wants to avoid paying interest on the full amount. Now, I'd be interested to know if she decides in the future to ramp up the payments to just get rid of this sooner. As her debts decreased, she began to sleep a little better each night. But as always, I do worry about continuing to have access to the likes of a GEM Visa card, as it's extremely easy to justify its use, particularly if it has a 0% interest rate. This particular type of credit card is often the one that sucks people back into consumer debt, in my experience. Plus, they advertise hard, always trying to entice you back. Because she was getting great benefit out of speaking with her brother online, she also started to meet up with 2 local women, her mentor being one of them, to have regular money conversations in person. They talk about investing, money, goals, and they set homework for themselves. They're all quite different women, which is great because it means they challenge each other as each of them think differently, but they have a shared interest that unites them all. So some homework for you, she thought, was to find 1 or 2 people who you have a connection with to get together and talk with each other about money and ultimately learn from and teach each other. It was her small group meetup that told her about a bigger one taking place in 2024, which was a 3-day personal finance retreat called Black Fi Day, which is a New Zealand first. Now, I was fortunate enough to meet her at this event, and once I and the other 50 attendees heard about the journey she was on, we were all instantly her new cheer squad. But it must have been quite something to rock up to an event, knowing no one and unsure what to expect. So I asked Gail how useful it was for her. She was proud of herself for going alone, and from the moment she arrived, everyone was lovely and chatty. If I'm at anything, there's always going to be chatting. And she said that they talked about money, but not just about the nuts and bolts way, but in a how do you want to change your life kind of way. She said she spent the whole weekend in her happy place, as she saw that when it comes to money, for her to win, others don't have to lose. Money is not a finite resource, and with zero judgment from the others and a willingness to share what works for them, it inspired her and made her realize that she is proud of how far she has come and she's excited for where she might go next. She said that when she left, she cried the whole way home because it was one of those truly life-changing experiences that helped her cement the path she is now on. Now, when you first decide to make change, there is a lot of rapid progress as you juggle bank accounts, cut spending, pay off debt, etc. But in time, things settle down. And this is where the test really begins, I believe, as a person settles into sticking to a path of permanent change, which often means saying no to things you used to do or buy. Well, Gail is sticking to that path, and month on month, she is improving her net worth. In 2025, this has been helped along with another career move into a position that now earns her $100,000 a year. She has doubled her income in the last 5 years, which is a fantastic achievement. Plus, she has Airbnb income on the side and hopefully in time, some side hustle income from her new online venture too. She feels that she has hit her salary ceiling for now, and taking it higher would mean getting more qualifications. This role has more hours, more responsibility, more work, and a longer commute, meaning she's more tired at the end of each day. So she's trying to find the work-life balance which will dictate what, if anything, she might do next. Now, for a few of her numbers which she's very kindly shared with me. In 2024, before she got her most recent pay rise, her total income, including her Airbnb and business income from her blog, after tax was $80,000. Her salary earned her about $63,000. Her blog business, which is now closed, went out on a high, earning her $10,500. And her Airbnb earned her about $6,500. So this gave her a monthly take-home pay in total of about $6,500. So where did she spend her money in 2024? The big numbers are as follows. She made mortgage payments of about $16,500, She paid taxes on her additional income of about $1,900. Insurance payments were about $3,500, and the rates she paid on her home were about $3,500. She paid about $1,300 on her power. Plus, she paid cash for 2 holidays, one to Black Friday and one back to England, and the total for these was about $6,500. And it was one that meant that she was spending in line with her values to spend time with family and friends. Groceries cost her about $7,500, which is about $140 a week. She still spends a lot on her dog, about $4,500, but it's a dog that needs haircuts, vet visits, and occasional boarding kennel stays. But she dotes on her pup, and it is a very hard place for her to try to save money. Her car cost her about $3,500, and another big expense was on gifts for others at a cost of around $5,000. Now, this is still a lot and something she's working on, but I think we can all agree that it's a vast improvement on the $11,000 she was spending before. Eating out costs her about $1,500 or $30 a week, and she has spent just over $2,000 on her hair, which is about $40 a week, and about $2,000 on her clothes. Gail is now living on less than she makes. She has created the all-important gap, a sum of money left over at the end of each month after all her bills have been paid. She is no longer overspending by $30,000 per year. Instead, she is underspending every single month, and you use this gap to pay off debt and then invest. A huge turnaround from the woman who used to say, "Oh well, life costs what it costs." And she shares all of these numbers so that you have something to compare to your own, if that is what you'd like to do. But mainly, I wanted to list them out to show the level of detail she now knows about her money. This is detail and information she never had before, and it's the difference between her being completely financially blind and now being quite clear about her income and expenses. Stabilizing her situation has allowed her to think ahead and set some goals, which I'll come to shortly. Now, in June of 2025, her house has a mortgage of $245,000. She has set the value of her house, if she was to sell it, at $500,000, meaning she has equity of $255,000. Her additional debt, which is of course that outstanding credit card balance, is just over $2,000. In regards to her assets, her retirement funds, something we've not mentioned yet, has a very healthy balance of $198,000. Yes, you heard that right, and I'll come back to that shortly. Plus, those Sharesies investments total $6,500 now. She has 70% in a range of ETFs and the other 30% in individual shares, which is pretty high risk. In addition to her KiwiSaver contributions, Gail is currently investing $120 a fortnight into Sharesies, and $100 is going into the S&P 500, and $20 is going to a ESG ETF. In addition, she is investing $10 each week into a crypto ETF, plus she holds those other shares still. Now, this crypto investment came from her 2 friends that she meets with locally, and each had to choose something that they would not normally buy. While her investing still needs some refining, she has made a start, and if you had asked her 2 years ago if she would become a share investor in the future, well, she would have said heck no. Now, I was delighted to learn that she now holds an emergency fund of $5,700, and this is just cash in her bank, which is still low, but it is growing. Plus, she has additional bank savings of $2,800. So her net worth, which is her assets, in which she includes the equity in her home, minus her debts, adds up to $476,000. Since 2023, she has been writing down her net worth monthly, which gives her some data so she can track her progress. And each month she is seeing a steady rise, which is exactly what she needs to see happening because she still has a long way to go. Now, let's circle back to her retirement savings because hers are in 2 parts. She has $69,500 in her KiwiSaver fund, which is with the provider Booster. She contributes 4%, as does her employer. They are a provider that charges some of the highest fees I've seen, and you really have to go digging to find their performance information. And in addition, the Booster product disclosure statement explains that If you use an independent financial advisor to help you with your Booster KiwiSaver scheme account, Booster will remunerate that advisor. There are plenty of advisors out there that only recommend specific KiwiSaver products and exclude others because they are incentivized to do so. But for you, the KiwiSaver investor, this is not giving you the whole picture of what other funds are available to you and may well be far better for you. Now, Gail thinks they should be called brokers, not advisors. And at least that way you would see that they're actually salespeople who are more likely to recommend Booster, not because it's in your best interest, but because it's in theirs. All this to say, just be mindful of whose advice you seek. Now, Gail looked up her KiwiSaver fund for me and says she has 75% in a socially responsible geared growth fund with a fee of 1.64%. Now, it's confusing to make sense of, but there is mention of a 1.75% charge on the interest costs because this is a geared fund. And a geared fund simply means that they are borrowing money to invest, and they charge additional fees because they need to pay interest on the money that they borrow. So she is either paying 1.64% or 1.75% or both. I'm not entirely sure. The fund is only 3 years old, and in that time, Sorted Smart Investor shows that it has both underperformed and outperformed the average of similar funds. The other 25% of her KiwiSaver is in the socially responsible high growth fund with a fee of 1.24% and has been going since 2010. And their 10-year returns are showing a return of 8.6% after taxes and fees, whereas according to Sorted Smart Investor, average returns of similar funds have been 9.1%. So you pay a lot more in fees with this provider to achieve less than the average. She's also paying an additional member fee of $3 each month, whereas a lot of other providers have scrapped this fee. And if she closes her account, they'll charge her $30. And whether that is per fund or for both, well, I'm not sure. She has no idea why her fund is split this way, but she must have specifically requested this when she joined, or how to move it into a 100% high growth fund. But either changing funds or changing providers entirely is very much on her to-do list. Now, in addition to KiwiSaver, Gail also chose to bring her retirement savings over from England at the time of Brexit, and these are also with Booster. The balance of this account was sitting at $128,500 when we spoke. It is a QROPS account, which is a qualifying recognised overseas pension scheme. You must move your scheme to a QROPS provider in New Zealand that meets UK requirements, and there are very few to choose from. And it's notoriously difficult to find a company in New Zealand to easily manage this investment in a cost-efficient way. And once Gail sat up and started to take an interest in her money, she realised that the provider she's using, Booster, might not be a good choice due to the high fees they charge and the low returns she feels she's earning on this investment. Once again, it was complex to pin down their exact fees without speaking to one of their advisors, and Gail herself found them difficult to understand. But from what I could deduce, they charge a range of fees, which total 1.41% for the growth fund, and because it's QROPS, there are additional charges of 0.9 to 1.4%, plus there were additional initial setup costs and then ongoing annual trustee fees. Gail's calculated that she is on track to pay about $1,300 New Zealand dollars in these trustee fees alone in 2026, plus the additional 2 to 3% fees charged by Booster. These fees are just taken out of her balance, and no doubt about it, they are eroding her returns over time. Because of this high fee load, she will end up over $100,000 worse off in time. You can go and check this yourself by using the Rebel Finance School Impact of Fees tool. Just Google it. So Gail's been tracking the performance of her QROPS investment, and it's making her increasingly frustrated that it's so expensive and performing so poorly. With her KiwiSaver, she has freedom to move, and it's easy to switch, and that's something she's going to do. You just find a new provider and sign up with them, and they will do all the work for you. With QROPS, though, it's not so easy. They have you over a barrel a bit because There are limited options due to it being a niche investment that the UK government has to approve first. When she signed up, she spoke to a financial advisor at Booster, who suggested she join their balance fund, which is also part of the reason her fund has not grown much. It was only more recently, in 2023, that she has moved to a growth fund, which is a better fit for someone as young as her, but she has also begun the process of researching and hopefully moving to a different provider. Now, I'm actually interested to hear from others who have moved their money from UK to a QROPS here in New Zealand. I know that choices are limited, and I'd be interested to learn what providers and funds you've found, as it would be helpful to others if I was to share that kind of information over on my blog. So far, Gail's hunt has turned up a few alternative providers who offer QROPS. There is iSelect, AMP New Zealand Retirement Trust, Craig's Superannuation Scheme, New Zealand Britannia Retirement Scheme, and New Zealand Funds. But each are quite different, and you would need to research them quite deeply. As for Superlife, because I know some of you out there will be thinking of them, they've very recently paused their QROPS offer due to the sale of their business. Now, all that to say though, what having a total balance of $198,000 in her retirement accounts points to is how regular investments into retirement funds add up. Without auto-investing into retirement accounts over her working life, her net worth would have been $200,000 lower today. Investing a portion of every paycheck makes every bit of sense, and if she could have avoided such a high-fee provider like Booster and been put in funds that better suited her age and stage of life, she could have had tens of thousands of dollars more by now. But if she makes some changes right now, she can stem the bleeding. So what does the future hold for Gail? Well, she's got some big plans. She wants to have her $245,000 mortgage paid off by the end of 2028, and she is aiming to be mortgage-free by the age of 50. She now just wants to get it done and enjoy the freedom that will come with knowing that she is fully debt-free. Her goal is to be earning $250,000 a year by working her current job and growing her side hustle. The more money she can make, the greater the chance of paying off her mortgage in time. She has a financial independence number in mind of $1.2 million, and she arrived at this figure by calculating her future annual expenses minus her mortgage payment to be $48,000 annually. And if she multiplies that $48,000 by 25, this gives her $1.2 million. What this figure means is that she needs to have $1.2 million invested in one broad-based ETF or index fund that buys the whole global share market in order for her to draw off an income of $48,000 per year, which is 4%, and feel comfortable that her investments will last as long as she does. She wants to have the opportunity to retire by the age of 53 in 2031, and much like her parents did, Gail now has a plan of sorts to get there. They're big goals, but she's got ambition. Now, there is still some tweaking to come, but step by step, she is gaining knowledge and refining her plans. These are some beefy goals for sure, and she knows she has a few headwinds, such as the thought that she has reached the salary ceiling for her industry. She is doing this on a single income while balancing debt pay down on her most expensive liability, her home, while also saving, investing, and living life, all while wanting and needing to travel home to the UK regularly, while also knowing that her car is getting older and may need updating. But with her mortgage up for renewal soon, and her mortgage interest rate very likely to go down, she is doing the juggling act we all have to do with money and doing her level best to stay on course. Now, as I near the end, I wanted to share a little bit more about her brother and the support they are giving each other to reach their goals. While I felt so motivated by her story, she said that her brother's turnaround was even better than hers. He had always spent every penny that he earned, but in April of 2023, she gave him the book, The Barefoot Investor, and he actually read it. He now has an investing rate of 50% by investing in Vanguard. He has upped his pension contributions and, like his sister, is doubling down on paying off his mortgage fast. He too got a little help from their parents. Crucially, he has completely changed his money mindset. He now tracks his spending in his hand-crafted and colour-coded spreadsheet. He has completed Rebel Finance School for the second time and chats with Gail about it in their monthly check-ins. He is also preaching to his work colleagues in the hope that they take their heads out of the sand as he now has. They had drifted apart due to circumstance, but this shared interest and goal has brought them so much closer together and made them excited for their future, which I think is absolutely awesome. Now, before I wrap up, I've just got another quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try Pocketsmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. That's pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. I've really enjoyed getting to know Gail. She has reminded me that you should never judge a book by its cover. As her marriage came to its heartbreaking but amicable end, and she transitioned into her new house that she had bought on her own, and then into her new job, it would have been easy to conclude that this poised, intelligent, and very kind woman had it all worked out. On the surface, looking in, she appeared to be doing well. But below the surface, she was paddling as if her life depended on it. It was her gnawing doubt and her dawning awareness that, financially speaking, things were not quite right that meant she slowly started to change the way she was managing money. The learning is ongoing, and she is still changing the way she manages her money. And once you start to educate yourself and implement some new behaviours, as you've often heard my guests say, it is amazing how quickly things can turn around. In the space of just 1.5 years, Gail has gone from not earning enough to cover her expenses, even drawing down on her mortgage to make her mortgage payment, to earning over $100,000 and living on less than she makes. Gail has also calculated that her net worth has grown by a staggering $113,000 in the last 1.5 years. Where did this rise in value come from? Paying off consumer debt and mortgage debt, paying into KiwiSaver and investments, which have grown in value, and saving up cash because spending less makes a huge difference. It's safe to say that Gail has worked out that although it would be nice to meet someone new and money would be a topic that came up on the very first date now, a man is not a financial plan. She has shown that her efforts are what has moved the needle on her financial turnaround, and her ongoing efforts to increase her income, pay off debt, and save and invest will be what gets her to her goals. She wants you to know that if you're listening to this and you can relate to her situation, it genuinely is possible, whatever situation you are in today, to turn it around quickly. Having listened to every single episode of my podcast and heard how quickly other people have turned their lives around, she still didn't think it was quite possible, but she tried anyway, and it's working. Sure, day to day it doesn't feel quick, but if you track your net worth like she's been doing, and you look back after 1 year and then 2, you will get the shock of your life at how far you have come. So just start. The time is going to pass anyway, she said, so just do it. Start making changes today because good decisions and tweaks, whether large or small, really do build momentum. So what a great episode. How fortunate am I to get to regularly meet people like Gail and have them so bravely share their stories so that they can help others who might be going through something very similar. On behalf of every listener to this episode, can we all please say a big thank you to Gail for having the guts to speak with me at length? And I'm really looking forward to staying involved with her progress. And if she says yes, I'll be very happy to share it down the track. So that is all from me this week. And if you want to get in touch, you know you can find me over at thehappysaver.com. Please do share my podcast and my blog with your friends, as it's still the best way that I can help other people learn something new about money. And finally, you know I would love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau, and just help me continue to help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.